Hey guys, and welcome. We are going to give you a quick lesson on winter camping. I've got Stu Van Armour here. He is an avid backpacker, assistant scoutmaster with Troop 99, and we're going to go over the basics of staying warm in the winter and packing correctly. Let's do it.
This segment is going to be on sleeping warm, and I'd like to reinforce some of the principles we've already voiced, which is it is easier to stay warm than to get warm. And so, like at any other time during the day, if you find yourself getting chilled, put another layer on. And the same goes with sleeping. And the first thing I'd like to talk about is a sleeping bag. This one is said to be rated at 15, but that's an optimistic number. I would recommend for most winter camping that you get a 0-degree bag. You don't have to spend a lot of money, but don't believe these ratings. Most of these bags you should store hanging up in a closet. If you keep them in their stuff sack, it compresses their loft. If we talk about the components of a sleeping bag, we have our toe box and the regular body of it. And then here's this oft overlooked sleep collar. I want you to zoom in on this thing so that they can see this. This is an inner collar that you can tie together around your neck and cinch up while you're inside here. That isolates your body from your head and your breathing. That way you can just stick your nose out and not be breathing inside the sack. That's important because as you breathe, the condensation from your breath can degrade the insulating value of your sleeping bag. So having said that, how do you stay warm while you're in here? If you're smaller than your sleeping bag, which may be the case with a lot of the scouts, and you have extra clothing, if you only come down to here, I'd say stuff some things down in the bottom to take up that extra space, and you don't have to heat it up. The other thing that you want to remember too is that most of your heat is lost to the ground. So get an inexpensive insulating pad, put it on the ground, and stay on it while you sleep. Something that's often overlooked in winter camping is this thing should be as long as your sleeping bag. You can get away with a shorty in the summertime, but in the wintertime you'll appreciate that extra warmth, because if your feet are hanging out over the end, you'll notice it and it'll keep you awake and you won't sleep well. So what do you wear when you're in a sleeping bag? I usually have a fleece layer that I use, long johns, a balaclava, and another base layer, and I'll wear the sweater in there. I probably would not wear my jacket, and I would usually take the jacket. Rather, I'll put the jacket and any other spare clothes or socks or things that I might wear tomorrow in my stuff sack, and that serves as a pillow. No need to bring a pillow. What do you wear on your hands? I usually prefer mittens. Mittens allow your fingers to clutch together and kind of huddle together for warmth. You can take them off and keep them with you in here. There's actually a little pocket in here you can clip them to. But I like to wear mittens. Mittens are a lot warmer than gloves. And then either the balaclava or the hat. And I have to add too, if you have a Nalgene bottle, a lot of times in extreme weather, we'll fill this with warm water and tuck it in here with you. It's a hot water bottle, and it can make the whole difference between being warm all night and being uncomfortable. Another word about water and drinking water. You got to be careful in cold water camping, because a lot of times if you have to pee, you don't feel like getting out of your warm bag and it ruins your night's sleep. And anybody who's experienced will say, just get out, go do that, and get back in. Even better if you just don't drink anything for the first 2 hours or so before you go to bed. Okay, a word about this little sack here. It's not called a fold-em-up sack, it's called a stuff sack, and here's why. You just stuff your sleeping bag in there. It's the way I keep my tent as well, and I keep the poles separate. And you stuff it in there, quick as a bunny. Until it's all in there. Now over the years, I've even taken to just stuffing it into my pack. Or sometimes, if I'm worried about it getting wet, into a plastic bag and then into my pack. And there you have it, stuff sack. So if we talk about staying dry, we have to recognize the possibility of rain or snow. And we'll talk about rain gear for your body, but I want to pause for a moment and talk about keeping your pack dry so that your gear's dry. So that when you set up your bedding at night and your tent, all of your pack stuff will be dry. This is a simple backpack cover. They don't cost that much, and you can get them online at reasonable prices. An alternative to that, if you're not ready to make that investment, is just a simple one that we make out of a garbage bag. We can take a garbage bag like this and we merely cut 2 slits in it, the same width as your shoulder straps, which I'll do right now. I'm just going through the first layer. I do something like that. And you can see what I've done. At that point, we can slip the backpack inside of it. And you've got yourself a nice little backpack cover for 2 cents. Okay, so now we have your gear dry. We're going to keep it dry, and we're going to keep you dry as well. So here Nancy has her rain jacket on, and she might add to that rain pants. This is a good system, and a lot of these are well made, but some of them are expensive too. And if you're not willing to take that route, there's another cheaper alternative, and I'll help Nancy take her pack off. And I'll show you what we have discovered over the years works equally well. With pack on, and the addition of a relatively inexpensive poncho, you can cover backpack and backpacker all at once. The value of this, in my opinion, is that air circulation keeps you from sweating through your clothes. You can also use this as a ground cover later under your tent or make a temporary shelter. And that's why many prefer a poncho. So as you exert yourself and are backpacking and find that you're warming up, sometimes the easiest thing to do is just take your hat off or put it back on. They say that you lose 80% of your heat out of your head. And next would be the second layer here. If she were afraid that she was sweating, she might shed that layer too and keep exerting to keep warm. The problem with accumulating moisture in your clothing is that when you stop, you start to get chilled. And when that happens, the first thing you want to do is put on another layer. Put your hat back on and another layer here. This is important to remember when we stop for lunch on backpacking trips, or even just a simple break in the middle of the day, because you're going to be drinking water and that's going to chill your core, and you want to get back on another layer. And again, that just goes back to staying warm is easier than getting warm. All right, let's talk a little bit about the fabrics we wear and choose for our clothing. You've seen on our gear list, and you've heard us repeat again and again, no cotton. This goes to everything you wear. We can't bring blue jeans along, we can't bring cotton socks or even cotton underwear. It's important because cotton retains moisture next to the skin, which leads to hypothermia and other chilling problems. So what we do is we use synthetic fabrics that wick the moisture away from our body and evaporate it into the atmosphere and keep us dry. And keeping dry is keeping warm, and it's easier to keep warm than to get warm.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about things to think about when you're packing your backpack, whether it's getting ready to go on the trip or when you're packing up after night one. And there's some really important things to think about. You're not just going to just throw everything in your pack. There's things that need to go certain places for balance. You want a lot of your weight to be kind of lower on your back. If all your weight's up here as you're hiking, you're just going to be doing so much more work as it makes you a little top heavy. One of the most important things that I find when packing my backpack is you never know if it's going to rain. We talked a lot about getting wet and stuff like that, but the one thing we cannot let get wet is our sleeping bag. Some people put them in a waterproof stuff sack. Even if you do that, I still try to always protect my sleeping bag. Sometimes I'll even wrap my tarp around it as I'm packing it. Kind of gives it another barrier. But I always try and put my sleeping bag in the pack so it never has to come out until I have my tent made. I have my sleeping pad in there, and then last thing to come out of my backpack is my sleeping bag. And so even if it's downpouring, I can still get away with getting my sleeping bag into the tent dry. Now, if you look at this backpack, I actually have two different compartments, and I can get, or two different accesses to the main compartment. So if I did not have two access points, I would say you would want to almost have this at the very bottom of your pack. And maybe even with that idea of the tarp underneath of it, so if you set it down in a puddle or something, you're not going to get it soaking wet. But being that I have 2 points of access, the way I'm going to pack it, and I'll pack it completely here in just a second and give you an idea, but I would probably put that in sort of the middle of the pack, and then I would go, well, what's going to come out first when I open this up? It's going to be my tent is going to come out first. I'm going to set that up with the poles, and then I'm going to pull out my fly. I'm going to put that over the tent, and then I'm going to start to like load in gear. So I'm going to go sleeping pad, sleeping bag, and that'll kind of all be in the bottom half of the sleeping bag. The upper half, I'm going to put things like my extra clothes, stove, water filter, my extra hat, cup, bowl, fuel, first aid kit, that kind of stuff. So, but at the same time, there's still an order that's going to go into my pack. Things that I'm not going to need while I'm backpacking during the day are probably, well, hopefully, an extra change of underwear. I've got another base layer there that maybe I'm going to put on just to sleep in. So that's going to kind of get buried. That's going to be like probably right on top of that sleeping bag in the middle of my pack. And then you got some other base layers, and depending on the day, you might be like, it's going to get really freezing today, so I'm going to make sure I've got like a windbreaker close to the top. I'm going to have my puffy jacket somewhat close to the top. But then also like your rain gear, that's going to go somewhere close to the top. And sometimes you can have just like a sleeve sticking out. So when it starts raining, you don't have to unpack your pack and get everything soaked just to find your rain gear. Doesn't make any sense. So have your rain gear probably number one accessible. Whether it's a poncho, which actually is underneath of this, you can see how wonderfully it works as a tarp. So whatever it is, have it on top. Also, something that you might want to have handy somewhere, your TP. That moment when you say this is the time, is not the time to figure out where in the world you put the teepee. There's another compartment on this backpack, and it's going to be up at the top here. And on this backpack, it's pretty large. And that's where I typically keep important little bits. And it might be a spot where you put a small first aid kit. If you have a bigger first aid kit, it might go in the body of the backpack. It's where I keep like my like a credit card, an ID, a little bit of money. I've got some games in here. I got Yahtzee, and I got Farkle, and I got a deck of cards. Also, I've got my spare batteries for my headlamp. Also, my headlamp. Now, just because this backpack and most every other Osprey bag has a little red clip, my headlamp always gets clipped there when I'm not using it. So when it's dark, we've made camp, and you forgot to find your flashlight, it's always, always, always going to be in the same spot. So some other things to think about would be things that are going to spill inside of your backpack, especially on a winter trip. Again, we're trying to keep our stuff dry. Your water bottles, I always pretty much keep on the outside. But if you put one inside, make sure it's not going to leak, come undone, break. That would be like really wet. Another thing, if you're using liquid fuel, that you're going to want to segment somewhere else on your pack, maybe on the exterior. If you're using canister fuel, that you have less to worry about there. But in colder conditions, canister fuel typically doesn't work as well as liquid fuel. Speaking of fuel, food is fuel as well. And we want to think about where we're putting that food in our pack for these reasons. If you say put all your food in a bag and stuff it in your pack way down low, you're hiking, you're like, man, I could really use a granola bar. You're gonna have to open up your pack, you're gonna drop your pack, open it up, find it, eat it. Better, you could put granola bars in a stretchy pouch on the outside of the pack, or you could put them up top where I'm putting all my little knick-knack stuff. And that way you can have your backpack on, and everyone might stop for a moment and you go, hey, you mind grabbing a granola bar? It's right there. Somebody else can unzip you, grab your granola bar. Same with water bottles. If they're in easy access side pockets, nothing too crazy tying them there. It's real easy. If you stand side by side with somebody else, you can grab their water, they can grab your water. Real easy. Meals, your breakfast and dinner more so. Lunch you kind of want a little accessible, but your breakfast and dinners can be packed deep down, saving space up at the top. Because you're not going to get into them other than when you're at camp and you've got your backpack unpacked. Some things you also might want to think about being close to the top or accessible, or at least packing it with a purpose, would be your stove. If maybe you're going to heat something up for lunch, or if the plan is to get to camp and sort of get food rolling before people start setting up tents. Another thing is your water filter. Sometimes you might get to a stream that you're expecting there to be water and there's no water, and then you get to another one and there's water. So having it accessible for that moment of, hey, let's all just fill up our bottles while we can is great. And you never want to be the guy on the trail that has dragged out his tent and his sleeping bag and all his clothes looking for that one thing. So if you know where you've put it, it makes a world of difference. But there's so many little things you'll learn as you gain experience, and every backpack is different. They all have different features, and so you'll find plenty of different ways to do it. But if I can get you to start thinking about, it's not just about getting it into the pack, it's about getting it into the pack with a purpose. It'll make life so much easier, especially if there's any type of rain or snow on the ground. You don't want to take anything out of your backpack you don't need to take out. what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna actually just pack a backpack. All this stuff is gonna go in there minus like food and a couple little things, but for the most part, this is all your bigger, bulkier items, the most important things. You got your layers, you got your sleeping system, and you got your tent, and then all your tools and cookware and stuff like that. All right, let's go ahead and see what this looks like in a backpack. Now, it's actually pretty sweet that I've got a tarp down because all my stuff is gonna stay nice and dry as I pack it. It's not gonna get dirty. Like I said, I'm gonna take my sleeping bag and I'm gonna kind of put it right in the middle there. All right, and then first thing that's gonna come out will be my tent. This is my fly. So I'm gonna put the fly in next, and then I'm gonna put my tent in. All right, so now when I go to open it, tent comes out, fly comes next. Let's see, is there anything else that I wanna put on the bottom? You know, an easy thing, you know, just kind of thinking on the fly here, if you know that your teepee's in that pocket, it makes it pretty easy, but I'm gonna actually put it up here, but if you're thinking it through and you remember where you put stuff, it makes it really easy along the way. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of force this down, make as much room up here as possible, because this is all your stuff that'll compress really well. Let's see. Well, why don't we attach my sleeping pad? And this backpack has a very convenient strapping system right here. Another thing we can do, the poles. Now, if you're splitting up a tent between two people, your buddy might get the poles or they might get the tent. But what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna strap them right on top of my sleeping pad and make sure that's cinched down pretty good. All right, what that actually does is it kind of makes a little kickstand. So my backpack's gonna stay upright really, really nicely. I just actually went on a backpacking trip where that feature was not there, and it was very annoying because I couldn't set my backpack down very easily without it just rolling onto its face. All right, we're gonna go so base layers. I'm gonna put my extra pair of socks in here, kind of down low, because unless I like really soak my feet and I'm cold, I'm not gonna change out these socks. Even if I get them wet, I'm gonna keep hiking as long as I'm comfortable to try and dry them out, because my dry pair of socks is for that moment where I start getting hot spots and I gotta get out of these socks, or I'm too cold and I just gotta get out of them, so I'm gonna put on my dry pair. But even with wet boots, if you put dry socks on, you're now gonna have 2 pairs of wet socks. So those are going in there. I probably won't need to see them for a while. Another base layer. Windbreaker, I'm gonna stash over onto one side. So I got like a little bit sticking out and it's green, so I know where it is. I'm gonna kind of do the same with my jacket. I know they're gonna be on this side. So if I see one, I know they're both there. Let's go ahead and we'll put the teepee in next. All right, and then maybe down in this quadrant, I would put the bulk of my meals. We can put my stove. I don't have a water filter here, but water filter might go here, or since this is such a large compartment up here, I might put the water filter up there. Bowls, cups, unless you're doing some messy meal for lunch, you're not gonna really need them. Let's see here. I'm gonna put my rain gear in here, nice and accessible. And actually another thing you might do, gloves, depending on the trip, if you're gonna be wearing gloves a lot, you might just like keep them in your pockets or put them in your warm jacket, put them in the pockets of the warm jacket, zip them in there. So when it's real cold, you're at camp, you bring out your warm jacket, you put it on, you've hiked down the way to go get water, and you're like, man, I wish I would have had gloves. You got your gloves there because you've already put your warm coat on, so you know you're gonna wanna try and be a little warmer. I'm gonna put my gloves sort of on top here, and then my hat. And a lot of the time, actually, I will hike with them tucked into my jacket, that actually does two things. It makes them accessible. Also, when these things get wet, and I take them off, and I'm now hiking, and I'm super warm, I'm gonna dry them out really easily. So that's a good little trick. 50 foot of cord. When I'm only hiking with like 1 or 2 or 3 people, I'll bring plenty of cord. This is probably 120 foot of cord. Now when you're with a group of 10 or 15, if everyone brings their 50 foot, that's a lot of cord. And so you can hang multiple bear bags, you can do tricky bear bags, you can make camp furniture, whatever you want, but cord is very valuable. I'm gonna start packing the top pouch here. So cord, I've started to carry a little bit of wire, but I've been doing a lot of cooking over a fire with a pot, and this is really handy. If you make a teepee, you can put this down, it's not gonna catch on fire. You can also lash with it really well. A little bit of tin foil, cover your pot, really good. You can also cook on it, just with a piece of tin foil over the fire. Little toiletry stuff, lip balm, hand sanitizer, some Aleve. We got a bigger first aid kit we're gonna put in here with some moleskin. It actually has a couple little fire starters in there. Some snacks, easy accessibility. I got some almonds. I'm gonna stash that right in there. I've already got my headlamp clipped in there. My spork. It is your one eating utensil that you bring. You don't need 18 different utensils, but also you're gonna lose it. So keep it, so I always keep it right at the front of the zipper. I'm gonna put my games and personal effects in here, dice, some more first aid equipment, the map. If you're the only one with a map, you're probably not gonna put it in your backpack. It'll probably be like in a pocket or something like that. But if you got duplicate maps, I'd put it in the top so that when you maybe end up ahead of the group a little bit, you're at the next crossroad, you've stopped, you're waiting for them, and everyone's like, where on the earth, where in the world are we? You can pull it out and study it and figure out where you're at pretty easily without having to open things up. Things like bug spray, obviously you're not going to have to dig for, but that's a spillable as well. I'd actually probably put this in a Ziploc bag if I were actually headed out right now, because that's not something you want all your stuff covered in. A little bit of duct tape. I also have a little duct tape around this bottle. This is probably all you'll need. I just found this a little while ago, and it's just such a nice little ball of duct tape. It's so little, but at the same time, it's adding weight to my backpack that might not be necessary. There's tons of things that I could bring, and that sometimes you do bring when you have a nice large pack, but every time you add that one little thing, it adds weight, and all of a sudden you went from a 30-pound pack to a 45, 50, 50-pound pack, and that's not fun. So it's all about cutting weight out and thinking what you're gonna need and what you're not gonna need. This is a personal thing to me. This is pretty much all I really bring as a bowl. This is what I put everything in. Usually when we're backpacking, it's something that can fit into a cup. You're drinking hot chocolate, you're doing oatmeal, you're doing your freeze-dried stuff. This is all you need. I can also put this in the fire. I can boil water right in that, put that little tin foil over top. It works great. The other cool thing, fits my water bottle really, really neatly. And if I actually put this down in my water bottle sleeve here, what it does is it makes like a sweet little holster. And it goes in really easily. I'm not fighting that sleeping bag that's pushing out the side right now because I've got that taking up space. Got my other bottle over here. And now you can kind of tell I've got the water weight down here. I've got my tent and sleeping bag right there. I will have a little weight up here with food, so maybe I would have put my food a little lower. But let's get this buttoned up. And there's all kinds of little straps all over this backpack to make it smaller and bigger. And I'm gonna just leave the tarp and the poncho out for this demonstration, but probably what I would do with that tarp is I would just tuck it in here in this pouchy area, and that way, let's say we get to camp and it had just rained, boom, got a tarp down, I can unpack, or I can at least set my backpack there. But yeah, that's a packed pack. All that gear is in here. I'd say it weighs about 30 pounds. You probably get to about 35, 40 pounds with food, but on a winter camping trip, that's pretty good. A nice 30 to 40 pound pack is where you want to be. If you're anything over that, I would suggest going through everything and making sure that you're only taking what you need to be taking. And as you become more experienced and you go on more trips and you start investing in gear, cut weight off of bulky items, sleeping bags, stoves, water filters, sleeping pads. But yeah, that's as simple as it is. And now you've got everything you need to have out on the trail. Nice and comfy. I feel like we ought to head on out of here. All right, guys, as we wrap up here, just a couple little pro tips that we've learned along the way. Some things when it gets really cold. If you leave your water bottle outside, well, you're gonna wake up to a frozen water bottle. Sleep with your water bottle, maybe heat up some water, put it in the bottle, sleep with it, it'll keep you nice and warm. Your boots also will freeze if you leave them outside the tent. All day you're hiking through some snow or something, they're wet, they're gonna freeze. Put them in a trash bag, put them in between you and your partner and, as you sleep, or even just in the bottom of your sleeping bag in a trash bag, and it'll get them nice and warm. It might dry them out a little bit, and then in the morning, really nice to put on rather than frozen pair of boots. Your batteries in your headlamp, put them in a little chest pocket, sleep with them. That way they'll last a little longer. If batteries get too cold, you're gonna see them not lasting as long. A little bit of a sleeping pad, maybe from an old one, or you just yours is a little too long. A little square about this long creates an awesome place to sit. If you're sitting on a cold rock, put it down. And also when you're kneeling, doing stuff, getting your sight set up, really great. Well, thanks for checking us out, and stay tuned for more. Subscribe, like, comment below.
$2.99.